You're probably wondering, what are the essential bow making tools? Well, let me show you. It really depends on where you're going to start the bow making process. For example, if you're going to cut down a tree, you might want a chainsaw or a large axe to cut down the tree. But if you're going to start with a stave, you're not going to need those tools. For the purposes of this video, we're going to start with a stave and explain all the tools you'll need from then on. And then here at the end of the video, I'm going to give you my top recommendations for what tools I think you should get. So the first part in the bow making process, once you have your stave and the bow wood is dry, is going to be removing the bark, the sapwood, and getting down to one single growth ring. And the tool of choice to do that is gonna be your handy dandy draw knife. This is universally the best possible tool you could use for this part of the process, and there's nothing that'll work as good as a good draw knife. Now, not too long ago, I bought a really cheap draw knife from Menards, and it was like 10-15 bucks, and it absolutely sucked. So don't go do that. Go get an old one like this, or spend a little more money than 10 bucks on it. My dad passed this one down to me, and it's worked absolutely fantastic. That one I got from Menards, I don't know, it might be in the trash, but you're gonna want a really good draw knife. Now, after you have established the back of your bow with a draw knife, the next thing you're gonna wanna do is draw out the bow for a layout. You can just use a Sharpie, and a tape measure for that should be pretty simple, and most people will already have those items. Once that's laid out, it's time to remove the bulk of the wood. And now my choice of tool is a hatchet for that. I really like it. It goes along the grain of the wood, but there's other options. A lot of people like to use power tools. So you could use a bandsaw, you could use a belt sander to help with this. Those are the most common tools probably that are power tools to use in order to remove the bulk of the wood, but use whatever tool you have or whatever tool you enjoy using the most. Once you have the bow cut down to layout, it's gonna look something like this. It's gonna be really thick. There's still gonna be a giant handle on it, but you've got it cut to the rough shape. Then you're gonna move down to tools which have more control at this point. And so you're gonna probably want to have something like a rasp. I've got a Nicholson 49 here, or you can use a Farrier's rasp, anything like that. And lots of times it's good to have different coarsenesses of rasp so that at the beginning you can remove a lot more wood, and then as the process goes on, you can start removing less and less wood so that you can have more control in the bow making process. Instead of using a rasp, you could use a belt sander. You could probably even use an orbital sander, or even like an engraving tool. You could even probably put like attachments onto an angle grinder, like a sander attachment. Anything, all you're trying to do is remove the wood down to where the bow is bending. You could continue to do it with a hatchet or a draw knife. You can often tip your knife up like this and scrape the wood, use it as a scraper. But the idea is that you want control, so you can use many different tools. But the most common tool, I believe, is going to be to use a rasp, and it's easier to make less mistakes if you use a rasp because it's very easy to control how much wood you're taking off the bow. Then you're going to start getting to a bending bow like this. The bow is going to start to bend just a little bit, and what you can do at this point is even move to a more controlled item. Once I start to get the limbs bending, I like to move down to a scraper. Now, there are many different forms and kinds of scrapers, but again, the idea is control. When getting near to the end of the tillering process, a lot of people like to use a tillering board like this. What this allows you to do is to put the bow handle here and then draw the string down to one of these notches, and it allows you to see how the bow bends. But this is not necessary. There's a guy on YouTube when I first started making bows who I watched, his channel's Bow Your Bows, and what he did a lot of times is he just went to his bathroom and he drew the bow back and looked at it in a mirror, and that's how he tillered it. So this is definitely not necessary, but it's definitely useful, I believe. Heat is something else you might want while making your bow. You do not need a painter's heat gun like this, although this is very easy to use. Turn it on like a blow dryer, heat up your wood, and then you can bend it. Very simple. But you can use a fire, you can use a grill, you can use a stove even with some steam. There's a lot of different ways to do it, so you can get around this, but this is a very common and very useful tool when making bows. Clamps are very useful when making bows as well. You can use C-clamps, bar clamps, any kind of clamp really. What it's used for is when you're bending the bow to tighten down the wood to a form, which I'll get right now. You could have a form like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. I've seen those often D-shaped forms. Clay Hayes uses one, really handy. I should make one of those sometime. But the clamps are used to clamp the wood to that after you've heated it up in order to bend the bow into the shape that you are wanting. If I could redo my bow making experience, the tools I would have purchased first is this. The very first tool I would have got is a Drawknife, and I would have got a good one. This one was passed down from my dad and it works fantastic. I'd go get one at a flea market or at an antique mall or something like that, garage sales. That's how I would get it. I would just sharpen it up myself. Good to go. The next tool I would definitely want to get is a hatchet. I really enjoy the process of using a hatchet. It's really fun, really easy, very useful. The next tool I would get that's essential is a rasp. I would get a coarse rasp, a Farrier's rasp or Nicholson 49, Nicholson 50, something like that. I personally like the Nicholson 49 because it's not too aggressive, but you can still remove a lot of wood with a little bit of elbow grease. And then that's it. That's all the tools I would get, just those 3 tools. And then I would pull out a pocket knife that I already have, and I would use this on end as a scraper, kind of like a cabinet scraper would work. Or this one's a Mystic scraper, like one of those, but I'd use a pocket knife for that because a pocket knife works just as good. So if I hadn't made a bow yet, I would get Drawknife, hatchet, rasp. That's it. That's all you need. You can probably get all this for less than $50, and you can get starting on making bows and having a really, really fun time. Here in the near future, I'm about to make a video about the complete guide of making a bow start to finish. I'm gonna make it a short video, concise, make it so that you can learn how to make a bow in one video. We're gonna do it out of the best bow making wood, Osage orange. So stay tuned for that. And I'd like to remind you guys to go create a wonderful day. KC Outdoors, this one's for you.